Before fear had a name, before it became a word whispered to children or carved into warning signs, it lived quietly in the body. It lived in the tightening of muscles, in the urge to flee before the mind understood why. Long before humans learned to swim, long before they learned to drown, fear already belonged to the ocean. 90 million years ago, North America did not look like a continent. It was broken open by water. A vast inland sea stretched from the Arctic to the tropics, swallowing forests, plains, and futures alike. The Western Interior Seaway was not an edge-of-the-world ocean with crashing waves and rocky shores. It was worse than that. It was endless, flat, deceptively calm. A warm, shallow expanse where the horizon dissolved and direction lost meaning. There was nowhere to hide. From above, the surface looked peaceful, almost gentle. Sunlight reflected softly, broken only by ripples and drifting shadows. But the surface lied. It always had. Beneath it, the water thickened into green darkness, and then into something heavier still. Sound did not travel far here. Light faded quickly, and once it was gone, it never returned. Life filled this ocean, but it lived cautiously. Schools of fish moved as one, not because they were united, but because separation meant death. Ammonites drifted slowly, their coiled shells beautiful and fragile, unaware that beauty had no value here. Sharks cruised the depths with bodies shaped by time and violence, their skin armored, their senses tuned to weakness, and deeper still, something watched. It did not move often, it did not need to. It knew this ocean the way fire knows oxygen. It understood currents, shadows, pressure shifts. It felt the heartbeat of the sea itself. When it moved, the water adjusted around it, parting instinctively, as if even the ocean understood what it carried. Somewhere above, a smaller creature swam alone, not injured, not young, just alone for a moment too long. The water around it felt wrong before danger appeared. A pressure change. A silence where sound should have been. Instinct screamed, but instinct was slower than what came next. The ocean surged. There was no warning cry, no heroic struggle, just impact so sudden it erased thought. Jaws closed, bones shattered, water rushed into lungs that had never known air. The sea swallowed the evidence immediately, smoothing itself over as if nothing had happened. Life continued. It always did. What remained sank slowly, spiraling downward through layers of darkness until it settled into soft sediment. Teeth marks pressed into bone, fractures frozen in place. A final moment sealed away from time, waiting. Millions of years passed. The ocean vanished. The water retreated. Mountains rose, forests grew, dinosaurs fell, ice came and went. The world forgot what had lived here, until one day, the bones came back. They emerged from dry land under a merciless sun, buried beneath grass and soil in what would one day be called Kansas. Fossilized ribs, cracked vertebrae, shattered skulls. At first glance they looked like countless others, remnants of a violent prehistoric world. But violence has patterns, and patterns tell stories. Dr. Elias Monroe knelt beside one such skeleton, brushing dust from stone that had once been living tissue. He moved slowly, carefully, the way one does around something fragile and sacred. The bone beneath his hands was broken in a way time could not explain. The fracture was too clean, too deliberate. He had seen this before. As more fossils were uncovered, unease settled into him like a second heartbeat. Different species, different depths, different eras, yet the same wounds repeated themselves again and again. Puncture marks, crushing force, angles that suggested not chaos, but intent. This ocean had not been random. At night, alone in his lab, Elias stared at the bones laid out beneath cold white lights. He imagined the final seconds of each life not out of cruelty, but out of respect. Every fossil represented fear, confusion. The moment realization arrived too late. Colleagues told him he was reading too much into it. Oceans were unpredictable, they said. Predators acted on instinct. Death was messy. Elias listened, nodded, and returned to his work. He had learned long ago how easily truth could be dismissed when it made people uncomfortable. But the evidence kept whispering. Digital reconstructions filled his screen, layering skeleton over skeleton. Bite marks aligned. Measurements repeated. A shape began to form, emerging not from imagination, but from consistency. Whatever had done this was enormous, larger than any predator officially recognized from this sea. But size alone did not disturb him. Precision did. This creature had struck the same way, over and over, across time. It had not simply hunted. It had control. It had reshaped behavior, forced adaptation through fear. It had ruled an ocean. Elias leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Outside, the world was quiet, safe. but his mind was deep underwater, surrounded by silence that felt ancient and heavy. He realized, with a slow chill, that the fear humans feel when staring into deep water was not irrational. It was inherited. The Western Interior Seaway was gone, but it had left something behind, not fossils, not theories, a memory. And memory, once awakened, does not rest easily. The bones followed him everywhere now. In the quiet moments between conversations, in the pauses before sleep, in the way his hands hesitated before turning off the lab lights, as if leaving them alone in the dark felt wrong. He had learned the language of fossils long ago, but this was different. These remains were not simply records of life, they were testimonies. Each fracture told the same story, not panic, not chance, but inevitability. He began cataloging them obsessively, lining up specimens taken from different sites, different layers of Earth, different stretches of time. Millions of years separated some of them, yet the damage repeated with disturbing consistency. The same crushing angles, the same tooth spacing, the same violence echoing again and again like a signature no one wanted to acknowledge. At night, Elias stayed long after the others left. The lab hummed softly, machines breathing in the dark like something half-living. He enlarged images on his screen until they blurred, tracing the wounds with his eyes, imagining the force required to make them. He imagined water rushing inward, muscles locking, fear arriving too late. He remembered the first time fear had shaped his own life, not in water, but in silence. Years ago, his early work had suggested that ancient predators displayed complex behavioral patterns: territorial control, selective killing. The response had been polite dismissal, too speculative, too emotional, too human. He had learned then that science tolerated numbers more than it tolerated meaning. Now the past was repeating itself. When he presented his findings, the room grew uncomfortable. Someone laughed quietly. Another suggested coincidence. A senior researcher reminded him that oceans were chaotic systems, that extinction was messy, that predators did not think the way humans wanted them to. Elias said nothing. He had learned the cost of arguing before the evidence was undeniable. But denial did not erase truth. The fossils told him this predator had not merely killed to survive. It had killed to remain uncontested. Entire regions of the seaway showed sudden changes in species distribution, as if life itself had learned where not to exist. Fear had shaped evolution here. Silence had become strategy. One night, Elias reconstructed the predator's skull digitally, based on bite impressions alone. When the image finally rendered, he stared at it for a long time. The size was staggering, yes, but what unsettled him was the symmetry, the balance. This was not a blunt instrument of nature. This was a design refined by dominance. He whispered into the empty room, "What did you do?" The screen offered no answer, only the shape of something ancient and patient, waiting to be understood. Water folded around its body as it drifted upward from the dark, massive and scarred, every mark earned. Time had taught it efficiency. It did not waste energy on unnecessary motion. It waited, it observed. It knew the routes prey favored, the depths where light died fastest, the moments when instinct betrayed caution. When it struck, the sea itself seemed to recoil. A massive fish vanished in a blur of motion and pressure, its body broken before pain could register. Elsewhere, a young predator fast, confident strayed, too close to a territory it did not understand. The encounter was brief. There was no feeding afterward, only destruction. A message written in bone. Life began to change. Smaller predators altered their hunting grounds. Schools of fish avoided entire regions, even when food was abundant. The ocean grew quieter in places where sound once thrived. Fear was no longer an emotion. It was law. This was not cruelty. It was dominance refined over years beyond counting. From the future, Elias watched this unfold through patterns and probabilities, his chest tightening as realization deepened. This creature had not just shaped its environment, it had traumatized it. The ecosystem had adapted not to abundance, but to terror. And then, without warning, the apex vanished. There was no gradual decline, no weakened bones, no sign of struggle. It disappeared from the fossil record as abruptly as it had arrived. The ocean, once bent around its presence, was left with an absence so vast it reshaped life all over again. Balance returned, but it was a different balance, one built on memory. Elias stared at the timeline on his screen, at the sudden gap where the predator should have been. For the first time, he felt something close to grief, not for the prey, but for the truth that would never be fully known. Some forces leave no explanations behind, only consequences. The modern ocean breathed calmly at the shoreline, waves rolling in with gentle indifference. Elias stood barefoot at the edge, the cold water touching his skin, and felt the familiar unease settle into his stomach. The same unease he had felt his entire life without understanding why. Now he did. Fear, he realized, was not imagination. It was inheritance. The Western Interior Seaway was gone, erased by time and stone, but its lessons remained etched into the nervous system of everything that had survived after it. Humans had never seen that ocean, never heard its silence or felt its pressure, yet we feared the deep instinctively. We feared what we could not see below the surface, because something once ruled there. Elias closed his eyes and pictured the ancient water one final time, not as a nightmare, but as a truth too old to soften. A world where dominance shaped evolution, where silence meant survival, where fear was the most powerful force of all. The ocean before him looked peaceful, honest, but he knew better now. Oceans do not forget what they have been, they simply wait for someone to remember. As he turned away, the waves continued their rhythm, hiding depths no human would ever fully understand. And somewhere deep inside the human mind, older than language, older than story, the fear remained, quiet, patient, and justified.